But they're going to see a difference between you and the world, because they're going to see that you're not leaning on the world's advice necessarily, but you're leaning on Jesus. You're leaning on God. You're leaning on the Spirit of God and what He says to be true. Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome. If you are new to this channel, my name is JoeTaverna, and here we talk everything Jesus. If it's about Him, I want to talk about it. I want us to talk about it. So please leave a comment, leave a thought, leave a question. I will answer it. But today we are going to be talking about a specific Bible verse, Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. And we're going to kind of connect some dots here with a couple other passages as well. But let's jump right in. So Proverbs 3, 5 through 6, this is in the NASB. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight." In the NIV, it'll say, "In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Really cool verse. I want to dive into this a little bit. I love it a lot, and a lot of Christians, if not almost all of them, are very familiar with this passage. It's quoted a lot. But let's start from the top again. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all of your heart." This is so important. A lot of times we compartmentalize our life into different places, and we'll let the Lord touch certain parts, but not all. And so when it comes to, let's say, finances, we'll be like, you know what, I can do this on my own, or I can handle this. I can figure this out in my own strength. But the Lord actually wants you to lean into Him, even in the midst of how to gain wealth in this life. This is also true when it comes to your health. There are certain things that He would love to be a part of, I believe, if not completely a part of, when it comes to your health. A lot of people are like, you know what, we got modern medicine, and I'm not coming against medicine. If you have to, you go to the doctor, of course. But sometimes we just totally disconnect ourselves from the Lord when it comes to our health or a healing that we might need. We don't trust that He can still be the same He was when He walked the earth, or Jesus was the same. We don't trust sometimes that He can be the same for us today as He was yesterday, even though the Word says that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Anyway, you see what I'm trying to get at. It's so important that we trust in the Lord with all of our heart, and we don't just compartmentalize our life and say, hey, I trust that you'll do this for me, but not this. We have to really lean into Him in every aspect, in every way, and begin to pursue to trust in Him with all of ourself, with all of our life. Now, I love this next part. It says, "And do not lean on your own understanding." The thing that I go to right when I think of this word lean is this passage in John 13. Listen to this. This is John 13, 21, and I'm going to read through 25. "And so when Jesus had said these things, He became troubled in spirit and testified and said, 'Truly, truly, I say to you that one of you will betray me.' The disciples began to look at one another, at a loss to know of which one He was speaking. Lying back on Jesus' chest was one of His disciples, whom Jesus loved." And it's speaking about John here. But continue, verse 24. "So Simon Peter nodded to this disciple and said to him, 'Tell us who it is of whom He is speaking.' He then simply leaned back on Jesus' chest and said to Him, 'Lord, who is it?'" Anyway, I think that there's this connection here that I'm going to try to make sense of between leaning on our own understanding versus leaning on Jesus. And before I get there, let's look at verse 6 of Proverbs 3. It says, "And in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight." Some translations, like I said earlier, like the NIV, it says, "In all your ways submit to Him." Some translations say acknowledge, some say submit. The actual Hebrew word right here is, some people would call it or pronounce it as yada. It's actually yada. It's actually pronounced yada in Hebrew. But what this Hebrew word means is to know. It means to know. It most of the time implies like a relational knowing. some kind of, sometimes it's a Jewish idiom or a Hebrew idiom that means sexual relations, but it doesn't always imply sexual relations. But it implies to know, to relationally sometimes know someone, even deeply. So what the passage is really saying, in all your ways, know him. No, don't just acknowledge him in the beginning of a situation. That's just part of what the word can imply. But after you acknowledge him, pursue to sit there and listen for what he has to say next, so that you can actually apply that thing that he reveals to you that you need to do, so you can submit to it. So the NIV has like part of the coin of what this word yada means, to know, and then the NASB has the other side of it. Yes, when you're walking down a certain path in your life and you don't know if you should go left or you should go right, and you're confused about the situation, don't lean on your own understanding. Lean relationally on Jesus, pursuing to trust in him with all of your heart and say, you know what? I want to know what your thoughts are in this given situation. You open up the word, you dive into it, you ask the Spirit of God to open up your mind to understand it. And as you're open up to what he's going to tell you through his word, using his word as a lamp to guide your feet and a light unto your path, while you're also open to the Spirit being a guide unto you as well, because we're called to keep in step with the Spirit as well. Galatians 5:25 says this. Using both of these things, the word and his Spirit, leaning on him, leaning on Jesus essentially, you can come to know what you need to do as you come to know him. And then you can submit to the things he begins to reveal to you by his word and by his Spirit on what you need to do. And this is how you see your path begin to be made straight. But notice right here, I feel like this is so cool in John 13, where the disciples, after Jesus says this wild thing like, yo, truly, truly, I say to you that one of you is going to betray me. It says this, in the very next verse, the disciples begin to look at one another at a loss to know of which one he was speaking of. But then they looked at the one who was leaning on Jesus to try to figure out or try to come to know what Jesus was talking about, so that they could figure out what was going on in this given situation based on what Jesus just alluded to about one of them is going to betray him. I find it so cool that they look to John, the one leaning on Jesus, for advice or for insight, so that they can come to know what Jesus really means. Man, the same is going to be true for any of us that pursue to lean on him instead of leaning on our own understanding. When we lean on God, when we lean on Jesus, when we lean on the Spirit of God, when we pursue to know him in all of our ways, when we pursue to acknowledge him in the midst of what we're going through, so that we can receive a word from him, whether he reveals it to us by his word or by his Spirit or by both, so that we can submit to it, we will not only see our path made straight, but we're going to run into people on this path that see that we're leaning on him rather than on what the world usually refers us to when it says, hey, the world says do this, do that, do that. But they're going to see a difference between you and the world, because they're going to see that you're not leaning on the world's advice necessarily, but you're leaning on Jesus. You're leaning on God. You're leaning on the Spirit of God and what he says to be true. And this is going to make you all the more shine as a light in the world. And people, just like in John 13, are going to be like, hey, what do you think about this? Let me get your insight. I see that you're leaning on something else, and I notice it. What do you have to say about this? You're going to see people come to you for advice as well. So I feel like this is like just a cool thought, because not only when you lean on the Lord, you'll see him make your path straight, but along this path, people are going to notice that you are leaning on him, and they're going to want to know like what you know. They're going to want to know why you know it. And eventually it's going to lead you to pointing back to the one you're leaning on. And in that position or in that place, when you get into that conversation, it brings him all the more glory. Really cool. Food for thought. But that's what I got for you guys today. I hope that blessed you. I love this passage. Proverbs 3:5-6, connected to this whole John 13 thing. But I love you guys. And until I see you next time, together, let's soar.